ask a question, give me a chance, please, to call on you. Because if you just start asking the question, I didn't get a chance to say, thank you, Emily, for that question. We really appreciate that.
Your mic's turned on?
It is. It's on.
So you're live. You can go whenever you want.
Hooray! Greetings. This is going to be a little review of the appraisal part of your book. My name is Sam. I have a PhD in education, so you can call me Sam or Dr. Sam, or I have one lady always, she's got this very heavy Italian accent. Professor! She always calls me Professor with this old world type of accent. Anyway, we don't stand on airs here, so you can all just call me Sam if you want to. And open invitation, I'm a certified residential real estate appraiser. If you ever have any questions about how to become an appraiser or something technical about appraising, please don't hesitate. But just ask me some questions. At any time, I can just give you an email address or whatever it is to get a hold of me to ask me appraisal-related questions. And today, like I said, is property valuation. Might as well get started on this. So we're in chapter 13 of your book, page 351. And we should probably start at the very beginning, like what is an appraisal? So an appraisal is an opinion of value. Appraisers can't determine value. Judges determine value. When you're in a court and you lose or win a lawsuit, the judge will say, Lisa's value is $10.95. And that's what the state would have to pay you if they wanted to take your house, for example. Judges determine those things. We, appraisers, just render opinions. That's all we can do. Sometimes our opinions are better than other times. And appraisers disagree all the time. So, and who can perform this opinion? In North Carolina, you have to have an appraisal license to do something called an appraisal. And it's as of a specific date. Oh, by the way, this information we're going through today is taking about 75 hours of appraisal instruction and condensing it into about an hour. So you're getting appraisal light today. That's why I say if you have any specific questions about appraisal, something not covered maybe today, I'm your guy. I can always help out. So how do appraisers get paid? I like how we put this at the beginning of the appraisal part. How do we pay appraisers? It's very important. Clearly, we can get paid a flat fee. Sam appraised LaDonna's house for $400, $500, whatever it is. Or I could get paid an hourly wage. I could be on staff. And they could say, Sam, we're paying you $1.95 an hour to go out there and appraise things. What is one way we can't get paid? Can anyone tell me why I can't get paid based on a percentage of my opinion of value? Yes, Christine.
You'd make the house more expensive so you could get paid more.
Actually, honest to goodness, that's a great answer, because every house I ever appraised would be worth at least $1 million minimum if I were getting paid a percentage of the value. That would be just a little bit unethical to do something that way. And I have been offered bribes in order to, in one case, to reduce the value, in another case to increase the value. So in case you're wondering, in your notes, write down, Sam did not accept the bribes, just to make everything clear here. So I've been offered bribes. I've had people flat out, brown envelope under a table, wink, wink, nod, nod, would you like this extra little gratuity for your help in this case? I've seen examples where I've reviewed appraisals where there has been outright fraud right on the contract. There was fraud in the terms of the agreement. So you get involved with state licensing agencies, get involved with the FBI, because they have this thing about fraud. They don't much like fraud. Their bank fraud division is actually larger than the division that handles bank robberies. So all sorts of different agencies come together. It's all about protecting the public. Why do you have to get a broker's license? North Carolina says you've got to get one, right? Why? I heard somebody say the right answer. So, to protect the public. Be loud and proud. If you say a wrong answer, just say, she said it. It wasn't me, it was her. So to protect the public from whom? You, me, to protect the public from us. Same thing in appraisal. We have to get appraisal licenses to protect the public. So that's why I can't accept a fee based on a percentage of value, because that would not protect the public. It would help me a lot, but it would be a disservice to the public. And there is a federal law, FIREA, that said that those wacky appraisers have to be licensed to protect the public. And the appraisal foundation is made up of various boards that are meant to protect the public from appraisers. The Appraiser Qualifications Board, they set the terms for qualifying as an appraiser. We've got the Appraisal Standards Board. You'll never guess what they do. They write the standards. And honest to goodness, in one uniform standards course I was teaching, there's one part of the ethics rule that it says the appraiser must not commit a crime. It's kind of pathetic they even had to write that in the ethics rule. As soon as I said that, there was a student sitting right about where Lisa is right now. It makes me kind of wonder about the middle of the back row sometimes. So this fellow all of a sudden wakes up and he raises his hand and he says, when they say the appraiser must not commit a crime, do they mean the appraiser must not commit a crime while he's appraising? And I said, no, you must not commit a crime anytime, at all, anytime. So he was thinking appraiser by day, car thief by night, or something, a little extra money on the side, I think. So Appraisal Standards Board. To do an appraisal, you need an appraisal license. And again, outside of class, I can tell you all the requirements for all the different levels of appraisal licensing. You don't need a broker's license to do an appraisal. And to become a certified residential real estate appraiser, for example, once you're a trainee, then to get up to the next higher level, you would need a total of 200 classroom hours, a bachelor's degree or higher, and 2,500 hours of experience in the field, where you actually do appraisals, you make a log, you have a certified appraiser signing off on your work product, and submit the entire log to the state of North Carolina. And that gets you this certified residential appraisal license. And of course, there's always a state exam you have to pass. Certified general, you're allowed to appraise anything, any property type, any complexity, but that's 300 hours, and that's 3,000 hours of experience in order to get that license. And I just was at this website not too long ago trying to get my North Carolina appraisal license. It's relatively well laid out, and it helps clarify. In order to do a appraisal, you have to be a licensed appraiser. As a broker, what sorts of valuation products are you allowed to do as a broker? Can you do an appraisal? What sorts of things has Len talked about already that you likely would be doing as a broker? Can you do a CMA?
Yes.
That's a comparative market analysis. So Meredith is right, you can do that. Have you heard of a broker price opinion, a BPO? As a broker, you can do that. Can you call them appraisals?
No.
No. And in some states, they have specific language that you have to actually put in your CMA or BPO. This is not an appraisal. You must not rely on this as if it's an appraisal. So here's a website that's chock full of information to become an appraiser. Brokers in North Carolina can do BPOs. As a matter of fact, the thing we'd like to clarify, I'd like to clarify, can a bank use a BPO to make business decisions? It's a foreclosure. And you could do a BPO and they can determine what list price to put the property at based on your BPO. Yes, Siobhan.
Why would a bank take a BPO as opposed to an appraisal?
Anyone have any ideas why a bank would want a BPO as opposed to a full-blown appraisal?
Cheaper.
Cheaper, absolutely cheaper, and usually much faster. And some brokers like to do BPOs on the side for a little extra income. If they're not overly busy with brokerage, they might do BPOs as sort of a side work. Lisa?
And is that a flat fee as well, that most banks must pay XYZ? Or?
Probably. Most banks will negotiate a fee. They might just say, we are XYZ Bank, and here is our set schedule. If you want to do BPOs for us, fill out the proper forms, get vetted by our commission, by a committee, and then we will pay you X dollars per BPO. And on a case-by-case basis, maybe you can negotiate a slightly higher fee. It's a 300-acre farm, and it's complex, and some of it's in a floodplain. There are things going on that might require extra work, extra analysis. Yes, Lisa?
And that brings up another question. Is there just a title of appraiser, or do you get specialized within certain markets? Like a farm versus plain old residential?
Good questions. So Lisa, the title is appraiser. It's either appraiser trainee, certified residential, or certified general. Nationally, those are the titles that we recognize. Every state could have its own special names that it might overlay on top of those. So in North Carolina, you might develop a reputation for being an agricultural appraiser. That means you typically don't appraise houses, you're not appraising shopping centers, but to do farm appraisals, you would need the certified general license.
Well, I'm constantly bumping into problems. For example, is the lender, the bank, they'll send out Joe Blow, the appraiser, to appraise my farm, and they don't know diddly about a farm. So I was wondering how I, as the owner of the property, can encourage whoever's sending that appraiser, hey, send me somebody that is trained to do farms.
I agree completely. It's a great question. So to summarize, whether it's a farm or if you own a commercial building or a house, how can you tell if the person coming out really knows what they're doing? It's a critical issue. In appraisal, we have something known as competency. We have a competency rule. And so before I accept an assignment, I should determine if I'm competent to be able to finish it competently. If I can't, there are procedures I can undergo just to see if I can't complete it competently. Usually I'll just wash my hands of the thing and tell them I don't know how to do this. If I'm a residential appraiser and I accept your assignment to appraise your farm, we would say I'm appraising outside the scope of my license. I'm actually violating state law. By appraising something I don't have the license to appraise. Well, could I still do that farm appraisal even if I'm a residential appraiser? If I work with who?
A general appraiser.
A general appraiser who has done farm appraisals, and then they can sign off on my work product with me. If somebody shows up at Lisa's farm, and like you say, they don't know diddly about farm appraisals, well, you had the right to question them before they ever even came out to your property. May I see your resume? How many farm appraisals have you done? How many farm appraisals have you done in my county? So you have the right to vet the person who's about to do your appraisal. Because none of my business, of course, but I'm assuming these are not going to be really cheap appraisals. You have a farm appraiser coming out to appraise a nice, big, healthy farm, you're going to pay a little bit of money to have that appraisal done. You want to make sure, just as if you were hiring a contractor to remodel your second floor, but they've never done a remodeling job like that before. You don't want them trial and error figuring out how to do your appraisal. So there are laws that are protecting you. And after the class, if you want to chit-chat about that in more detail, we can chat about that too. But great questions, thank you. So brokers can do BPOs or CMAs. You can get paid if you're a broker in North Carolina, especially to do BPOs. A provisional broker can perform a BPO, but they are not allowed to collect a fee for having done it. So if BPOs are a source of revenue you're thinking about for the future, you might not want to remain a provisional broker for too terribly long. You'd like to become a broker so you can start charging for these things. But in any event, whatever happens, you can't call your BPO an appraisal. What would happen if you called your BPO an appraisal? Why would North Carolina be upset with you?
You have to have a license.
You're supposed to have an appraisal license to call something an appraisal. Can I do a BPO? I'm a broker. Therefore, I can. Can I do an appraisal? Yes, because I'm a licensed appraiser. But whatever I'm doing, what should I do? Whatever I do, I should identify clearly what it is I'm doing that day. What hat am I wearing? Am I wearing the appraisal hat that day or the broker hat? Because those are two entirely different animals. How are you going to get paid as a broker? Do you get paid a flat fee? No. Meredith says you get paid a commission
For the BPO?
for the just being a broker.
You can get paid
In North
anyway-
Carolina.
anyway.
You get paid a commission normally, and that's a percentage of the sales price. But you just told me an appraiser can't get paid that way. So how confusing is it then if I try to pass myself off as an appraiser doing a BPO? The way I get paid might be ethical or unethical, depending upon what hat I'm wearing that day. Am I the appraiser that day? Am I the broker that day? So if you have both licenses, it can get to be pretty hairy sometimes as to what you're doing. Now, value. What makes up value? The components of value. I like acronyms, little memory devices, little abbreviations. So DUST, demand, utility, transferability, scarcity. DUST, demand, utility, scarcity, transferability, dust. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So people talk about supply and demand all the time. So let's talk about those two things together. Who wants to buy my cup of coffee? No? No takers? It's kind of used. It's kind of lukewarm. I'm trying to make a pitch for the coffee, trying to sell my coffee. In all the classes I've ever taught for years and years, she's looking at me, Ashley's looking at me like it's all just disgusting. Like, oh God, your coffee? Ugh. All these years, for some reason, no one's ever wanted to buy my used coffee. What's the demand for my coffee? Zero. Therefore, what is its value on the open market? Zero.
Not a very good value.
Yes, exactly. Can you see how it has intrinsic value to me? Because it's my coffee and I want to finish it. So it's got value to one person. But that's not market value. The value is essentially zero. Also, what's the supply?
There's free coffee.
Yeah, you have free coffee and lots of it, and if we run out, they'll bring more. So the supply is huge. The demand for this cup of coffee is nothing. Combined together, the value of this coffee is zero. But this cup of coffee, is it real property or is it personal property?
Just personal.
Personal property. So we can move it. I can move my little cup of coffee. Let's move the class to the Sahara Desert. We're now in the middle of the desert. You don't know where the next source of water is. This is no longer Sam's nasty cup of coffee. This, in all capital letters, is the water. The only source of water you've got. What's the supply now? Notice how I'm holding it much closer to me now. This is my water. we have a cup of water.
Supply went down.
Supply is this.
Okay.
What's the demand?
High.
You'd rather own this than the Mona Lisa because you can't drink the Mona Lisa. So supply and demand shifted. And now the value of this is sky high because everybody wants it and there's only one of it. Have you ever watched the Antiques Roadshow? I like the Antiques Roadshow. People come on with like the dumbest stuff sometimes. If I ever were on the Antiques Roadshow, it would be something worth like $1.95. If they put you on camera, it's either something really good or something really dumb. So for me, it would be really dumb. This one guy brought in a blanket. Just a blanket, very plain. The appraiser immediately dropped everything and put him on camera. You know it's got to be something really good if they're putting you on camera. And it was an old American Indian blanket made by an American Indian master craftsman 200 or 300 years ago. The appraiser had never seen one. So an expert in that field had never actually laid eyes on one. The long and the short of it is, when they told the value, fortunately the owner was sitting, how much do you suppose the blanket was worth? And this is on, we'll go to PBS's website and see the episode. That was a $500,000 blanket. Who wants to buy that blanket for $500,000? Because none of us is in the market for that. Would somebody be willing to pay a $500,000 for it? A museum, a private collector wanting to complete a collection. There are only like 3 or 4 in existence in the world. He had one of them. And he told everybody he had that blanket on the back of his chair at home. He was sitting on it. It's like, no more, but he had been sitting on the blanket all this time. So it calls to question. You might like the blanket, you might want it, but who can afford to buy it? That's actually effective demand. In real estate, who here would like to buy a nice $5 million home? Why don't you buy one? Pick one up for me too while you're at it, you know? Get out the old checkbook and pick one up, would you? I'd appreciate it. Well, there's demand for it, right? Huge demand. But how many people can actually afford to buy it? I've worked with brokers before who had sophisticated buyers who were trying to buy high-end real estate, and they were having trouble because every time they'd go out and look at a house, immediately it was snapped up before they could even make an offer to buy it. They got to the point where they kept $5 or $6 million in a checking account so they could write a check to buy the house. They can make an offer, write a check, here it is, here we go. And ultimately, if you have that type of sophisticated buyer, that's what effective demand is all about. So supply and demand, we talked about that. Supply and demand actually tells you what type of market you're in. What type of market is it if there's a large supply of houses but very little demand? What's happening to sales prices in that market?
They're going down.
They're trending downward, like 2007, 2008, around that time. What if it's the reverse? What if there's very little supply on the market, and as soon as a house comes up on the market, immediately it's snatched up? Huge demand, very little supply. What's happening in that market? Prices are going up. And we have utility. What is the usefulness of a house? What can you use it for? So you can live in it, right? That's a good suggestion. You can live in the house, roof over your head. That's it? That's all you can think of you can do at the house? I'm expecting at least 5 or 6 more examples.
Entertainment.
You can invite friends over. You can do what else?
You can make income renting it out.
You could rent it out, and you could claim IRS tax deductions. You can make income. Airbnb, you can rent that thing out for weekends or whatever it is you can do. Also, never, especially residential, never forget that pride of ownership is a huge issue. it gets back to the point we made just minutes ago about entertainment. So you had mentioned entertainment, and you entertain, you're proud. I appraised an 8,000 square foot house once, and it was 3 years old when I inspected it. It had plaster walls. It was built with plaster. It had a cement interlocking tile roof, 5-car attached garage. How many people lived in it? Two. A developer and his wife. And they had 2 grown children. They'd come home from summer from college and pick which of the 7 bedrooms they wanted to live in that summer. And it was sterile like a museum. It was used as a business card for the developer. They had a 1,000 square foot kitchen. And they would host these extravagant parties where all these people with money would come, and they would say, look, we can build a house just like this for you. That was the only purpose the house existed. The very next day, I appraised a 1,500 square foot house that had a family of 5 living in it. And the lady was apologizing because, you know, the area right above a door, like right there, that area? A teenage boy was living in this 1 bedroom. He would take a basketball and shoot it up against the wall right in that spot. So after a period of time, there was an indentation in the wall. This would have driven me crazy. It's like punk, punk, punk all the time. But it was her house and her family. She apologized because there was this dent in the wall. I thought that was great. I'm not going to take points off. I thought this was a family living in their house, enjoying their house. The other house, the 8,000 square foot house, if that owner had had a teenage boy shooting a basketball against one of his walls, he probably would have had his son arrested. He would have kicked him out of the house or made damage to my house. So the usefulness of a property, rental income, living in the property if it's residential, and transferability. What is the usefulness, what is the value of a property if you can't sell it? If you can't freely market it, what is the value of that property? Well, what could cause a problem in transferring ownership? Yes, Alan?
Maybe there's a lien.
Exactly, a perfect example. A lien. If you're driving down the street, can you see a lien on a property? It's a monetary encumbrance. Suppose there was a really nice house worth $300,000, but, oh, by the way, it had a $500,000 IRS tax lien on it. Who wants to buy that house? Because if you buy the house, what else are you buying? A $500,000 lien. As a matter of fact, who is probably going to wind up being the owner of that house in the long run? Probably the bank or the IRS. The owner is not going to be at that meeting where the IRS and the bank are talking about who's the owner of the house. So that can affect value. Absolutely.
Is there anything else typically other than a lien?
A lien definitely can do it. Easements can do it. Usually it's the most insidious if you can't see it, like easements, liens, things of that nature, encumbrances on the title. Those are the things that usually get you. So you could have a listing. Everything looks all very straightforward. You're marketing, you're getting offers. An offer is accepted. When would you find out that there are these mysterious things happening in the background?
During your due diligence?
During due diligence, you'll find these things out when they start researching things. Hopefully, long enough time before the closing, so you have time to try to react to it, to try to recover from these things. Sometimes you just don't recover. A $500,000, will you tell me, a $500,000 IRS tax lien, is that always the kiss of death for a transaction? The reason I picked a $300,000 house is because it probably would be the kiss of death for that. How about if it's a $3 million house? And no mortgage, it's all $3 million of equity. At the closing, just make sure you pay off that silly little $500,000 lien, and the deal goes through. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. Any other questions about good old
I
dust?
just want to make
Yes,
sure I
Lisa.
understand utility. Utility as it relates to, it is usefulness, is
Yes.
that what you said?
Utility and usefulness, Lisa.
That seems really ambiguous for an appraiser to put a value. I'm sure you got a plus or minus usefulness? Or how do you incorporate that into, I am appraising it to be? How does that fit in there? Because that looks like that would be subject to the user.
I would, well, actually, it might be subject to the user, absolutely. In just a few minutes, we'll talk about highest and best use. What is the highest use of the property? And that relates directly to usefulness, too. So if you don't mind, we can table that just for a minute, and then we'll get right into the heart of that when we talk about highest and best use. Any other questions? Questions? Yes, Meredith?
Do appraisers use only comps that are in the MLS or just sold through the MLS and not for sale by owners?
Meredith's question, can appraisers only use MLS sales, or can we use other sources, any other source, whether it's for sale by owner or assessor data? We can use data from whatever data source we think is reliable. And so I like to verify my sources, as a matter of fact. So I might start with a multiple listing sale, and then just to make sure there wasn't an error of some sort, because sometimes things are on the MLS listed as having closed, but they didn't actually close.
Right.
So I just want to verify, maybe with the assessor records, that it did close, and verify the sales price and the size. So I have due diligence I have to perform. I could go with for sale by owners. Suppose Alan said he sold his house 6 months ago, and he sold it for $300,000. As nice a guy as he is, I mean, he looks okay, he looks like a nice guy, I probably would trust him. But would I bank my license on what he just said? I would look for another source to back it up. And there's this urban legend out there. I've talked to so many homeowners, at the end of the inspection, they're going to say, "Oh, Sam, there's a sale. It's just like my house, except it's not as nice. It's sold for $1 million. My wife's husband's brother's sister's relative to a cousin told us about this sale. It's down the street to the right. It's blue. You can't miss it. And that's sold for $1 million. That's a comparable sale." In all the years I've ever been told that story, how many times have I ever found that sale? Exactly never. It's something the owner heard about, maybe they made it up, so I have to rely on data, hard data. MLS is a nice place to start, but whatever source I use, I want to back it up. Even on the appraisal forms I've got, they expect more than one data source to verify the data I'm using. So thank you. Yes, Alan?
For the demand, could you take into account the offer that the buyer puts on the home? Is that ever like considered in kind of the value?
In terms of demand, Alan's question is, can we use offers that are on the table right now? Would I know about them? So if I make an offer to buy Brooke's house, who else would know about my offer on her house? Brokers would know, she would know, I would know. Would the appraiser appraising Meredith's house, would they know about this offer? They would only know if your property is listed, Brooke's property is listed, and you accept the offer, and now it's a contract pending, and we see on the MLS there is a contract on your property. Do I know what the agreed upon sale price is? So I would call Brooke's broker, which is incredibly difficult to say. I just realized that. It's hard to say Brooke's broker. So I call Brooke's broker and ask them what that sale price is. You suppose her broker is going to want to tell me what that price is? Suppose the deal falls through. And now people know what you were willing to accept. So that is working against her. Her broker would be violating fiduciary duties, blabbing to everybody, especially the appraiser. The appraiser not even on your deal. The appraiser on some other transaction, what she was willing to accept on her property. So What I could use are active listings. Your house is listed for $400,000. I see that in the MLS. I'm appraising Alan's house. I can use that 400,000 kind of like pie in the sky. That's what one seller thought they might get for their property. It establishes a high end of value for that neighborhood. But what's better, an active listing that hasn't sold, or comparable sales that have actually sold and closed, and they're proof of the pudding? I see what people were willing to pay for houses. So by far I want sales, comparable sales. But I can use contracts pending. I can use active listings. I've even gone so far as to call Brooks Broker, and I'll say, I know you're not allowed to tell me what the sales price is, but was it less than 400,000? And the broker might say, yeah. Was it over 300? It's like the Price is Right high-low game, you know? It's like, at some point they get uncomfortable playing the game and they stop. But if I can get a range, it was between 350 and 400. And then I want to know how many contingencies there are left. What is left to be met? How much due diligence? Are we out of due diligence? Or do we still have a month to go, or what? That'll tell me how strong that contract pending is. So all kinds of different data sources. When I'm appraising a farm, getting back to those examples, what are the odds I'll see a farm on the multiple listing service? So I need other sources, maybe other commercial databases that are available, or assessor data. So, questions? Now, like anything in any chapter, you have to know some terminology. The reasons I want you to know this material reasonably well, not only are you passing exams based on this, but in real life, you want to buy properties, you want to sell properties, you want to help other people buy and sell properties. Well, you should know the terminology so you know it for you, and you can explain it to other people that you're trying to help. Your clients are going to come up to you and ask you questions about anticipation or conformity, and you have to be able to understand and explain the concepts. So value is worth. What is something worth in the open market? Price is the actual sales price. It's what a buyer and seller were willing to pay. And cost is how much it takes to manufacture something, to produce something. Now, you know the difference. So from here on out, when you want to say price, you mean price. When you say value, like the appraiser appraised it for $100,000, that's the value. And cost is how much it took a builder to actually build the house for. Cost, price, and value are completely different concepts, and they mean different things on tests. So you have to be really careful which word you're using at which time. Appraisers render opinions of value. So value is always an opinion. Cost could be an estimate. Christine wants to have her bathroom remodeled. They have an estimate of $50,000 to do it. That's the estimate of cost. Or Brooke had her bathroom remodeled last year. It cost her $75,000. That cost is a fact. You have receipts, that's what you paid for it. And then value, if it's already a done deal, that's in the public records. This property sold for $200,000. And market value. This is one of 1,000 different definitions of value. The most common type of value that you have to work with is market value. It's what the typical buyer is willing to pay. It's what the typical seller is willing to accept. And it's based on an arm's length transaction. Arm's length, no duress. You know, there are a lot of words you need to know. Basic terminology. You've got no choice but just to sit down and learn vocabulary. But it's not just real estate specific terminology. Sometimes you'll see words on tests. They just expect you to know what they are, even if they're not specific to real estate. Duress. Duress is something like you're under pressure to do something. If I'm forced to sell my house, I'm going through a foreclosure, a bankruptcy. I have to sell my house right away. I'm under duress. If I'm under duress, is it likely I'll get a fair price when I'm trying to sell my property? Probably not. When I'm appraising your house, I have to assume the transaction is not under duress. You have a normal arm's length type of transaction. It's not what Siobhan wants to pay for a property. It's not what Emily wants to receive. It's what the typical buyer and the typical seller are willing to do. In North Carolina, oops, where am I? Sorry about that. In North Carolina, every 8 years, the assessors reassess properties. The assessment is supposed to be 100% of market value. You could contest that, I suppose, if you disagreed with what their opinion of market value is. But just remember, for testing purposes, assessed value, this isn't true of all states. In North Carolina, assessed value is supposed to be 100% of market value, and it's supposed to be a reassessment every 8 years. Anyone have any questions about that? Alan?
So what's a horizontal adjustment?
Pardon me?
The horizontal adjustment?
A horizontal adjustment? I don't know what a horizontal adjustment is. I don't like that. That's all I know. I know how to wave my hand. But I can look that up for you. And on the break, we will address that issue. How does that sound? Does anyone else know what a horizontal adjustment is? Yes, Christine.
When you raise all the prices at the same level, so like you can raise all the prices in that area at 4%, 10%, depending on the market.
Very good. Thank you for that.
But I do wonder about this. What sets the reason for that? Is that just an income producer for the local
Supply and
municipality?
demand, transferability, all those things set that level.
Inflation.
Yeah.
I suspect they would do some sort of market analysis to see how much properties have been increasing over the past 8 years. And if they establish a percentage that's fair across the board, like 4%, like Christine had mentioned, they'll just apply it all across the board. If a certain property type should have been 2%, it was lagging behind the market, you then, if you owned a property like that, would make the case it wasn't fair. And you'd try to call them out separately, I would think. So that is assessments. Forces that influence value. We've seen 4 items that create value, that's dust. There are forces that influence value. Oops, sorry. That would be social forces, economic forces, political or governmental forces, and physical forces. So social forces, what in society could potentially influence property values? Who here watches HGTV? HGTV? Oh, there are more of you out there, I know. Everybody raise your hands. Everybody watching HGTV. Because you can buy a house, fix it up, and flip it in about a half hour. That seems pretty reasonable, I think, half-hour showtime. That's why people get into real estate, just because it's so quick and easy like that. Well, if you are watching shows like that, then how much in tune with social forces do you have to be as a buyer, seller, as a broker, helping buyers and sellers? Later, we'll look at the cost approach, and we'll look at obsolescence. And then in obsolescence, you have to know the metal cabinets in the kitchen. Are those obsolete? Are they out of date? Should they be replaced? So social forces, people are buying green. People want to refurbish properties. People now can buy solar roofs from a company that produces solar panels that are roof covers. They're roof shingles. People want that sort of thing nowadays. You have to be in tune with those forces. Economic forces, the Fed takes actions that cause interest rates to rise or fall. You have to be on top of these things. Those things affect property values. Political forces, governmental forces, that could get back to the Fed, affecting property values. Physical forces, you're in a tornado zone, you're in a earthquake zone, you're in a floodplain, a FEMA designated floodplain. All these things can affect property values. Any questions about things that can influence property values? Now, many, many, many economic principles of value. These are things that we have to understand just to begin to understand how to perform an appraisal. Highest and best use. I promised we'd talk about highest and best use, and here we are, finally. So in highest and best use, it is the most profitable use. In my mind, as an appraiser, I assume the land is vacant. If there was a house there, I take the house off. Now it's vacant. What should be there? I compare what should be there with what actually is there. Almost all the time, what is there is what is supposed to be there. It's no big surprise. There's a house there. What should be there? A house, almost always. So usually we're looking at highest and best use. The assumption is it's the current use. There's only one highest and best use at any one time for that land. And just because a house is in a commercially zoned area doesn't necessarily mean the property is worth more. It's not an assumption you can make. You have to do the analysis to see, if I tell you you own a house, it's zoned commercial, and the highest and best use is a restaurant, what did I just say about your house?
It should be a restaurant.
That, yeah, the house shouldn't be there anymore. Goodbye, house. It's been nice knowing you. And now it's time for us to tear the house down. I've seen this in real life. I've seen busy streets, commercially zoned, and there's a little, in this case, a church building, very small church building, on 3 acres in a suburb renowned for restaurants, zoned for a restaurant. And what happened to the church? A restaurant owner bought the church and the land, tore the church down, gave the congregation an obscene amount of money. They were very happy they got to move out of there, and they bought a whole new church for themselves down the road. And right what there now is a very successful fast food restaurant, changing highest and best use. The value of the church was actually negative because they had to tear the building down to make way for the restaurant. That's all highest and best use. So what is physically possible to build there? What is legally permissible? The zoning, usually. What is financially feasible? Of all the uses that could go there, which ones would return any positive return on investment? And of all the ones that are feasible, which one gets you the highest return on investment? That's the highest and best use. Substitution underlies all of the approaches. Sales comparison, income, cost approach. If something is of similar quality, if you have a choice between buying property A, B, or C, they're all identical. Which one are you going to buy? The cheapest. And in the sales comparison approach, then in the sales comparison approach, you're going to look at sales that are very similar to the property you're appraising. You're going to substitute them on paper for the subject. It's all about substitution then. So are we about finished for our little shindig? So we can take another break if you want to. We can finish up the video, and when we come back, I'll finish appraisal. And thank you very much. I appreciate your... Did you put the Tom Cruise filter on there so I look like Tom Cruise?
You look beautiful, man.
Okay.